So we are an independent consulting company, and we focus on mobility. And we've been using StreetLight for quite a while now. So we have a lot of examples of what we've done. And so what I want to talk about today is how we've used the StreetLight data to size demand for a variety of projects. So first, I think I want to give a quick overview of how we've used StreetLight data at Steer. And then I'll focus on projects where we have been looking at sizing markets. And then finally, I'll do a case study using LBS data, but as part of a much larger effort where we've been merging customer data with LBS data for data market analysis. And then if I have a few more minutes, I can show you a few cool things we've done on COVID-19 recovery. I'm not sure I have time to get to that, but let's keep going. So how have we been using StreetLight? So basically, LBS data for us at Steer, it's been mostly helping toll roads and state DOTs and also lenders for those toll roads and sizing demand. For high-speed rail projects, we've been looking at OD patterns at the intercity level using LBS data. For transits, and that's, I think we'll talk about that later in that presentation, we've used LBS data from StreetLight that include buses, but also ferry. We did a cool ferry project in New York City where we looked at LBS data coming into and out of Manhattan. City and places, so bike lane, we've heard a talk earlier today. And then finally, mobility as a service providers, we've helped TNCs, we've heard Uber Elevate discussion earlier. So all those are our case studies that we've used and where we've used StreetLight data at Steer. So what is this unmet demand really? So what's happening is that demand in general for the project for our clients includes both existing customers, but also the potential ones, the non-users that we would like to attract to a particular mode, be it transit, for example. So typically our clients have a solid understanding of their own customer database. An example is Amtrak. They have a good understanding of who are their customers. What they do not know, though, is the people who are actually not using their service but that would like to attract. And so far, surveys have been the go-to tool to assess that basis. But we all know surveys, and this has been said many times, they are expensive and they suffer from low sample size and biases. Here again, StreetLight comes in and helps us solve both issues of low sample size and at a much cheaper cost than surveys. So how have we done that? This is one example where we use LBS data focused on particular transit stations. When you set up your geographic layer, you can set up your zone so that you focus on specific transit stations. And we've looked at how travel changed throughout the day, and also how loadings are changed throughout the stations along one given corridor. So that's one example here. We've also done this. This is an example for a transit station, but we've done that as well for Amtrak in general for the entire Northeast corridor, and where we focus both on the rail stations and on the flows, the OD flows between key city pairs. And that's one of the strengths of StreetLight, the fact that we can customize our zones to the level of aggregation that's appropriate for the study goals. And so for Amtrak, for example, when we were looking at the entire Northeast corridor, we were actually using zones that would span states, several states. Whereas when we did this particular study, looking at particular transit stations, the zones are much smaller. So how do we do that now? How can we gain information from that LBS data? So first, we set up behavioral models that basically try to represent how travelers make choices. It could be a mode choice, when, why, and how they travel. And for that, we use LBS data, but not only that, mostly customer data, tickets data, demographics, census, land use, and sometimes real estate data as well. Separately, we have aggregate demographic information and then OD information from StreetLight that we put together. And then we use the model generated in the first step to simulate those patterns. And what are the applications? I mean, some of the application is like just a simple one. When shall we schedule maintenance or impose higher fares or reduce service? That was actually the one of the questions that we were asked by Amtrak, is to look at which station service should be increased, which station service should be reduced, and actually if they are unmet demand in some non-served corridors. So that would be, we were making the case to actually open new stations to serve those markets. So this is a cool example of how we forecast the propensity to travel by market segment. And you can see that it's not just LBS data. I mean, the OD data is important, but it's also supplemented by all the demographic information. So socioeconomic data that we get both from StreetLight, from its own database, and also from external sources, I mean, the census and others, and of course our clients who have a good understanding of their customer databases. So here's another example, pretty cool one, where, so this map shows an example of a population growth map with the number of new homes being built, shown using like small hex cells. We call them hex cells. And then the areas of high growth can be easily identified, like in dark blue. So how do we go after identifying places where we have unmet demand? So first we create those layers, those zones. And one of the strengths of StreetLight is that we can customize it as we wish. And so for this particular example, we've used fairly small zones, but when we worked for in the Northeast Corridor or in California, we used actually larger zones. Again, it all depends on the goals. And then the second step is to actually create some clustering. And this can be done using the LBS data, looking at trip production and attractions for each of those zones, but not only, because we supplement that data with population, employment, and consumption data, a combination of all those to highlight some corridors. For this particular example, we used home-based work trips, as identified by StreetLight, and we supplement this as well with the CTPP journey to work data from the SES. And the third step, which is all the fun, is basically is the analysis, where we start finding patterns or outliers. And those outliers are actually what our clients are more interested in. It's like to see where there is demand that is not met. So I think this is, I've shown it before. I mean, analyzing current demand patterns using LBS, comparing with client sales and their transaction data, because sometimes what we see is that their transaction data doesn't necessarily match the overall demand. And that's those type of outliers. That's what we want to bring to the attention of our clients so that they can market. We've done that for, again, both like transit agencies, but also private clients for especially mobility as a service providers. We've used actually StreetLight VMT index quite a lot over the COVID period, try to forecast and try to help our clients anticipate and also adjust their operating plans. I mean, you think about Amtrak that had to actually cancel many trains and then bring them back and then anticipate travel, for example, for Thanksgiving. If I were to ask you, so do you think people will travel for Thanksgiving? by hair, by train? Those are very interesting questions that we are being asked to answer, and StreetLight helps us answering those, or at least anticipating the trends.